I don't think James Madison would approve.
It's Saturday, September 7th, 2019. The Democrats propose a green leap forward, saving us from cow farts. Trump decides to at least use protection when screwing the taxpayer. The lights are going out on the Bay. San Francisco has deemed the NRA as a terrorist group. And resisting the centralization, Brexit Chaos, Brits still trying to fight for their independence. Barney Quick, Renaissance man, how the hell are you?
I'm able to sit up and take nourishment. I find that encouraging. How about you?
I'm glad to be back at the Libation Station.
Yes, we're back at the Libation Station, and welcome to you. Welcome back to the Libation Station. Pour yourself something bracing and pull up a stool and join us for an hour of examination of a number of things on our nation's plate, and the world's plate, actually.
Yep, as we come to you fortnightly and forthrightly.
Yes, delivered fortnightly and forthrightly. It's the Barney and Clyde show, and we have a number of ongoing segments, and some new ones we introduce from time to time. I think, you know what occurred to me? This is episode 14, isn't it, Clyde? We are now into our second half year of B&C.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Well, cheers and congratulations.
You bet, yes. And thank all of you. Thank all of you. I noticed just 3 new views today on the last episode.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. We will get more of those posted and get those going and make sure that those are being seen a little bit better. Yeah.
Hey, that Starbucks espresso roast has got some pep to it, doesn't it?
It's quite nice. It's very, very, very earthy, very crunchy. I've had an enormous amount of coffee already today.
Yeah, me too.
So I'll probably get like a little insane later. So
all right.
Maybe I'll be the animated one this time.
Okay. Well, all right. We've got 4 segments today. First off is green excuses to impose tyranny. That could well be a frequently recurring segment. There's all right. You know, that whole idea of having a 7-hour debate on the climate crisis. They're no longer using the term climate change.
There was no debate. It was just splaining.
You bet, yeah. Sit down and shut up and listen. Mm-hmm. We're going to tell you how it is. But it's, viewership was abysmal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I never thought it's really kind of sad that it was so boring and exhaustive because there were some really scary things that occurred throughout the evening.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders, for one thing, with his population control proposal.
Oh,
if the third world had more abortions, it'd be helpful.
I've got some stuff on that too. Yeah.
Okay. Well, but the 2 we're going to talk about today, and then they were brought up at that debate, and then the 2 particular candidates I'm thinking of have since then issued proclamations in one form or another along the same lines. At one point, Kamala Harris was asked by someone in the audience, and this person was really, kind of scary looking and in her zealotry and so forth. And the assumption, yes, that obviously, since this is a crisis, ... would you be willing to do this? This is the way she framed it. She, the audience person said, asked Harris if she'd be willing to change federal eating guidelines. Yeah. Which my hair stands up on the back of my neck when I hear the term federal eating guidelines. Is that something James Madison would approve of?
Right.
Federal eating guidelines. I think a lot of you know I'm a foodie. For about 20 plus years, I had a Saturday morning radio show called Stirring Something Up, which was all about, I did recipes and restaurant reviews, and I talked about wine collecting and herb gardening and all kinds of stuff like that. I'd have guests on, chefs and stuff like that. I'm a foodie. I love to brag about things. I put up a lot of food porn on social media, and my wife and I like to explore new restaurants. You're kind of a foodie too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And what goes in my mouth, it gets personal when they start talking about the federal government regulating that.
Yeah. I have to wholeheartedly concur.
You bet.
I have that clip that you're talking about.
Okay, let's hear it.
Are you ready to get mad, Barney?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to watch the clip of Kamala Harris at this.
Okay.
And thank you, Carol, for your work in the question. There's, I think of the point that you're raising in a broader context, which is that as a nation, we actually have to have a real priority at the highest level of government around what we eat and in terms of healthy eating, because we have a problem in America.
What's the problem that we have in America? She's talking about obesity, isn't she?
I kind of think so. Is she going to spell it out for us?
I think she is, yeah.
Okay.
All that we are now, the subject of this conversation, we could talk about the amount of sugar in everything. We could talk about soda. We could go on and on. So
why don't we talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
So there's sugar in everything, right? Americans are not healthy. There's sugar in everything. People are. There's an obesity epidemic. It's bad news, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whose fault is that?
The individuals who put those sweet food items in their mouth.
That's one. That's
Yeah.
one culpable entity. I would argue that the entity who is altering the price of sugar by subsidizing it and subsidizing corn and creating a
Distorting the
distorted market for sugar and corn syrup, which is just sugar, are to blame because they've created a false incentive to pursue foods with a low cost and high caloric content.
Yeah.
That's the fault of government. Not only that, the food pyramid thing. Let's let her talk a little bit more.
yes. But I'll also say this: the balance that we have to strike here, frankly, is about what government can and should do around creating incentives and then banning certain behaviors. I mean, just to be very honest with you, I love cheeseburgers from time to time, right? I mean, I just do, and I
love how she qualifies it with from time to time, like, oh, I'm just moderation, like, you know.
And I think that, but there has to be also what we do in terms of creating incentives that we will eat in a healthy way, that we will encourage moderation, and that we will be educated about the effect of our eating habits on our environment. And we have to do a much better job of that, and the government has to do a much better job of that.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, you love cheeseburgers.
The government is not B.F. Skinner.
Right.
It is not in the behavior modification, or at least it's not supposed to be.
And one thing that kills me is they talk about the food pyramid and like government creating incentives for people to make dietary choices, so they're not shoving down your throat their forceful will, but they're giving you incentives on what to eat. And if you look at the old food pyramid, right?
Yeah.
It was based all in these carbohydrates, pasta, bread, with an emphasis on wheat, with no nutritional information to back this up, no nutritional science to back this up. They're talking about stopping red meat. And if you look at the pyramid, red meat is, I want to use a lefty term, 1/10 of 1% of the top corner of the food pyramid here.
Yeah.
It's such a small piece of it. I don't understand why they.
Yeah. And how are people who do keto diets supposed to do them if we don't have meat?
Why is everyone getting so much healthier, reducing the number of carbohydrates in their diets?
Yes,
you know what I mean?
But and this, boy, talk about a Venn diagram overlap between your libertarianism and my conservatism. All this is so far beyond the scope of what the federal government ought to be concerned with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So far.
Yeah. And if they wouldn't distort the market, things would probably level out to it.
Because all the way down the chain of food producers, clear down to the people that put stuff in boxes and that goes on the supermarket shelves, they're saying, hey, it's cheaper to use government subsidized sugar than some other ingredient that we'd have to go out and get,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so all they can do, and then they make the claim that producing the meat, produces greenhouse gases, and there's no doubt that that's the case. Is that
because of the cow? Is that the reasoning behind it? Because I know the UN is also doing a worldwide push to get people to eat less meat.
Yeah.
Is that the thinking behind it, that cows letting off methane?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that it's a greenhouse gas, and and honestly, like if you talk about industry, from what I understand, the livestock agriculture or livestock farming is the heaviest contributor to methane in the atmosphere.
Yeah. And just like with Bernie Sanders and his population control proposals for developing nations, this is real first world snobbery.
Yeah.
I guess you could even call it bigotry or racism or something. I'm not inclined to lob those charges any more than necessary, since they are lobbed so much. But it's at least snobbery. It's we know what's best for you, and never mind that you're still developing, and they raise lots of cattle in the third world. And just tell them that they have to leapfrog over the advancement that we enjoyed in order to get to this utopian green. By the way, have you seen the posters? Oh, I should have. I didn't know we were going to take quite this conversational tack, but Sandy from Westchester, AOC, yeah, commissioned some graphic designer to come up with these posters for her Green New. Have you seen them?
No, I haven't.
I'll have to send that to you, and then we'll put them up on.
Should we look at? Should we?
Yeah. See if you can find it real quickly. AOC Green New Deal posters. They look like something out of Stalin era Soviet Union. Proud comrades with this big thing in the middle of a public space or something. There you go. That's them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no. Let's go images here.
Okay.
And we'll go back to the browser view.
Yeah. There you go.
Are these real?
They are. Yes. She really had those commissioned. Those are. Look. I mean, doesn't that look like something right out of 1930s Soviet Union?
Oh my God.
Yeah. The new man kind of a proud comrades willing to sacrifice for the common good kind of a thing. It's just spooky as all get out.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. And
here's her actual Twitter feed.
Okay.
Showcasing them.
Yeah. She's proud of it. She thinks they're great.
Amazing.
And so, but this whole idea of the connection is so tenuous. If we're talking about cow expulsions, I'd love to see a study done on how much methane is produced by cows' tail ends worldwide, and the extent to which anybody thinks it's all.
Yeah.
I'd love to see.
Well, I'm sure that the math could be done.
Yeah.
On that one.
I don't think any of these clowns have done it, but that gets real personal when you start talking about regulating what goes in people's mouths, or even creating incentives, behavior modification tools.
And in order for what?
Yeah.
What
control is what it comes down to.
It has to be, because unless you're saying, here's the exact target we're going to hit, here's the exact metric of what we're going to accomplish by doing these measures, then it's open-ended. It must be about power. It must be about control.
Right, exactly.
Or it must be about just, self-aggrandizing or something.
I think that's definitely a strong element, too. And then Elizabeth Warren got into the whole fossil fuels thing at the debate, and then she kept harping on that theme. On Friday, she promised to sign an executive order on her first day in office, putting a moratorium on new fossil fuel releases, and she pledged to ban fracking everywhere. She promised in a tweet Friday to sign an executive order that puts a total moratorium on the fuel releases. Does she really expect to win Pennsylvania with a ban on fracking?
Right.
And Oklahoma?
Yeah.
Her home state, by the way. Politically dumb, but maybe she just so fervently believes this that she doesn't care. The other side of and the other part of it is that natural gas, you cannot ask for a more clean energy form.
Yeah.
And fracking, there were those stupid movies made about how it causes earthquakes and causes your tap water to get set on fire.
But there are consequences to every form of energy extraction. Fracking is probably not perfect, just like nothing else is perfect. Just like windmills and solar panels require an enormous amount of space.
Yes.
And an enormous amount of carbon to industrially produce the things needed to produce the energy, to capture the energy. and transport. Like it takes a truck, one semi truck to carry one of those blades from where it's produced to. You ever see them on the highway, and it's a single blade on an entire.
Yeah.
And then you go out there, and go to California, and it's for miles and miles and miles windmills.
Yeah.
Each one of those hauled by a single semi truck.
Yeah, you can't get them there on your bicycle.
Yeah, it's your solar powered moped is not going to haul that
right
over there.
But once again, it's this notion that government has a place in the decisions of millions of free sovereign individuals as to what energy forms they're going to avail themselves of.
Yeah.
That is between producer and consumer. Old Barnes' first law of economics: a good or service is worth what buyer and seller agree that it is worth, period.
Right.
And if people are choosing dense, readily available, consistently available, readily obtained and consistently available and inexpensive energy forms, which strikes me as a smart thing, a well-advised way to go.
Yeah.
If they choose to do that, then that is their stinking business.
And it might be a better choice to make. It just depends. I mean, I'm all for green energy, but the thing is that if you are talking about how much total cost of ownership energy carbon is produced by a certain activity, well, the fact that fossil fuels have an enormous amount of energy potential inside of them that can be released. I mean, if you get more energy per unit of work it takes to extract it, then you've produced less pollution to produce the energy, which means the energy itself, more of the energy gets used for human flourishing and human progress.
Exactly.
And if you ever read the book, and I've got an article by him up here I'd love to cite, but Alex Epstein.
The moral case for fossil fuels guy?
For fossil fuels.
Oh, yeah. He's great.
So here's really quickly, let's look at some statistics here on CO2 emissions and climate-related deaths.
Thank you.
You got the same thing?
Yeah, you go ahead. Yeah,
well, so it's just interesting that we've got this climate crisis, right? And I am in no way trying to make the claim that the climate is not changing. I think that's the state of climate.
Might get outside our overlap, but that's
just,
right,
I mean, the climate changes. We had an ice age, and it wasn't caused by industry or anything like that.
Right.
The climate clearly changes.
In the 1600s, I used to skate on the River Thames over in London. Yeah.
The climate changes.
Right.
And I also think I've seen plenty of pollution. I also think that it's not unfathomable that human beings would have some impact on that.
Yeah. Okay.
But if you look at the sheer objective numbers, you can see as CO2 emissions have gone up and the atmospheric CO2 levels have also gone up, obviously, that climate-related deaths have plummeted over that time. Because, we're putting more CO2, more carbon into the atmosphere, but the reason they were doing that was because they were building houses and making human lives more able to resist the elements, making people less poor. Here's another interesting one where, if you get through all of history and then you get to, the last century, basically, the last century and a half, CO2 emissions go way up, right? The GDP per person goes way up. The life expectancy goes way up. And the population goes way up. So people are, I mean, I understand, like, we have weather events, we have more CO2 in the atmosphere, all that stuff, but we have a better overall situation than we've ever had in history in regards to, surviving the climate.
Yeah. But a little fact about your CO2 emissions, they're down to where they were in 1985.
Yeah.
A third
That's
of a century
fascinating.
ago. Yeah.
You don't hear that.
Yeah, and the population was smaller by a quarter then. Segment 2 is, we've done this one before, and there's usually no shortage of content if you want to, whenever we want to do it. Maybe someday we'll try a free market.
I doubt it.
Yeah. No. And this is one of those that is going to not exactly endear me to a lot of people who identify themselves as conservatives, but have jumped on the Trumpist bandwagon, which I have not. I'll say that fortnightly and forthrightly. Yeah. protectionism, once again, you are talking about the individual decisions of individual business entities, companies, corporations,
People.
to do business with other. Yeah, and that boils down to people, and they are privately owned organizations that can do whatever they damn well please, and tariffs are a tax. They are a distortion of the market of the value of a good or service, and the excuse is often used. Well, we're now starting to realize that China is the same totalitarian country with imperialistic ambitions that it was during the Mao period. True, but distorting the free market is not the way to go about addressing it.
Yeah.
Addressing that, and then boasting on Twitter about, hey, we're really putting the squeeze on China. You know,
even with the Soviets, like more trade, more openness, more more commerce would have been a good thing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Would even raise their look at the way it's raised the standard of living for China
and Vietnam. Hanoi is a bustling modern urban city now. With beautiful parks and skyscrapers and all that good stuff.
Right.
Yeah. You ever heard of a writer named Veronique de Rugy?
I have not.
Oh, I think she writes for a fair amount for Reason, but where did I see this piece of hers? I think at Town Hall. She gets into all this, and the tariffs on metals and other intermediate and final goods that are being imposed, and she says there's a reason why businesses set up their supply chains globally instead of domestically. This business, because this business, the Trumpists have this reasoning that, well, we give them incentives, negative incentives, i.e. tariffs, they'll start bringing their businesses back to the United States. I don't think so. There's a reason why business, de Rugy says, there's a reason why businesses set up their supply chains globally instead of domestically. It allows them to get the highest quality parts for the lowest prices. When production becomes more expensive in the United States, businesses raise their prices and are less competitive. And she points out that the positive impact of the tax cuts is now winding down, and just in time for new taxation in the form of tariffs. She points out that Chinese tariffs are failing to bring back jobs. The data shows that in most cases, when firms move out of China, they aren't relocating to the United States, but to Southeast Asia. Vietnam saying, come on in.
Yeah.
I mean, let's
take your
do
money.
some business.
Yeah.
Even the U.S. Commerce Department acknowledges that tariffs are a challenge for companies wanting to move production to the United States. The manufacturing sector is showing signs of a slowdown.
Yeah.
This is not the time to be monkeying with their attempts to cope with that.
Yeah. It doesn't make putting up barriers to entry doesn't make America more competitive.
Right.
We're already at a disadvantage because it costs so much to do business here. And
I remember the first round of Trumpism that got going during the 2015-16 election cycle. Radio talk show hosts, I remember Laura Ingraham in particular, bad-mouthing the transatlantic or Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. That was designed in order to tamp down China's influence in international trade.
Okay.
Yeah. So, protectionism, the idea, America first. Bring those jobs back here. What it boils down to, that's industrial policy. And once again, I don't think James Madison would approve.
Yeah, you want to bring those jobs back here. I'm sorry, government can't do that.
Exactly.
You need people to do that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They're not going to bring the jobs back. They're going to have to create new jobs. If you want the steel industry back,
Yeah.
create the next steel.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because that technology, it's gone.
Yeah.
Someone else is going to produce it cheaper and more effectively, and they've got the entire supply chain. You know what I mean?
You bet.
It's time to develop something new.
Yeah.
Reared in metal or something like that. You know?
Yeah, sure. I've I've got a buddy who's a sales rep for a steel warehouse in the Chicago area,
Mhm.
and he calls on stamping companies and forging companies and
Mhm.
screw machine houses and things like that. And he says these people are really sweating it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I recently did an article on how local farmers see the harvest shaping up for our local newspaper, and they said much that to a person, everybody I interviewed talked about, along with the erratic rain patterns we've had and all that stuff. They brought up the China tariffs and said that it was putting the squeeze on them, and that. And pointed up the absurdity of the aid package to them
Mhm.
in order to compensate for the effect of the tariffs. How about if we just eliminate that step and let them keep that money in the first place?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I had another round of exchange with
Okay.
with a conservative buddy of mine on Facebook who says, it's way past time for never Trumpers to get on the bandwagon and get behind our guy. And and somebody in a comment underneath his post said, everybody left doing that is a bunch of rhinos. And I said, I am no rhino. Anybody can read my blog, which, by the way, anybody who's new to this program, is it all right to do a little shameless self-promotion?
Yeah,
here?
go ahead.
Yes, I blog at least daily at late in the day. Sometimes several times a day. And so it's you can just, late in the day, Barney, quick, Google it and have a look.
You're going to start posting some of your blog posts to our Facebook feed.
I have already done that.
You've
There's
done
a
that,
few
so,
of
so
them
you
up.
can
Yeah.
go and find the link there.
I've got an ongoing, recurring series of posts under the name "It's This Kind of Stuff." Today's edition. That
I think the rhino thing would fall in there quite. It's that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So why don't you explain that? Explain to me what a rhino is.
a Republican in name only. It's
Okay.
it's a derogatory term that it predates the Trump phenomenon, actually, and I understand. I mean, these like so many of the failed presidential candidates we've had over the last 20 some years. Bob Dole and John McCain and Mitt Romney, who
George W. Bush.
yeah, George. He was a successful candidate.
Well, he was a successful candidate, but he was a
with some help from the
failed
Supreme Court.
failed human being.
Yeah, but yeah, even him with Medicare Part D, and all that.
It's a Republican in name only. Like, does that mean you actually believe in free markets and the freedom of the individual?
No, quite the opposite. It means that you cave at the first little prod,
Well, they sound like they're the rhinos then.
Yeah, a rhino's as a matter of fact, on my blog, I don't use it so much anymore, but I had a term I used a lot: reasonable gentleman syndrome. These Republicans are, we're all reasonable gentlemen and gentlewomen here in this august chamber, and our friends across the aisle, we all send our kids to the same summer camp. We see each other at the same cocktail parties. Yeah. We even sit down and have lunch together in the Capitol mess, and we've worked together on legislation. They all have the same ultimate goals we do. They just go about it differently. No, and
it might have been true at one time.
And which gets back to my case. I'm no rhino. That whole reasonable gentleman. That's tantamount to rolling over and exposing your underbelly and letting the leftists claw your entrails out. Yeah. And so I'm nobody's rhino, but I'm not a Trumpist either. There, I said it.
Well, it's kind of like any president. I don't really love the idea of presidents at all, but if a president does a good action, I'll support them, and if they do something I don't care for, I will. I mean, nobody damn what I think, but like you don't have to say that's my guy. It's not about the guy.
Exactly. It's about the ideas and principles.
Principles. It's about the principles.
And Trump has settled into this cycle of doing about 2 or 3 good things, making some kind of deregulation move or good judicial appointments or something like that, or giving a good speech. Once in a while he's done that. And then just negating the positive effect of it all with some really cringe-inducing stunt, and a Twitter rant or changing his schedule or this whole Sharpie Gate thing that's going on now. Trumpism and conservatism are 2 different things, and that's
I think
my story,
that
and I'm sticking with
I
it.
think that that's right, and I think that if you are a avid Trump supporter, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah,
if you believe in you line up with Mr. Trump 100%, that's fine. But you're not a conservative. That's not what a conservative is, right?
Thank you.
So but that's fine. You don't have to be a conservative. This is America. You're free. You can be whatever you want.
How are we doing on time?
Well, we're running up against it. We better go.
Okay.
Should we go to San Francisco?
Yeah, let's ever so gracefully segue into segment 3 here.
Okay.
The lights are going out on the bay. Any of those old enough to remember 80s pop music might catch that reference. A San Francisco-based rock band called Journey had a song that talked about the lights coming on in the city, and I love to sit on the hillside and watch the lights come on my city by the bay or something.
Yeah.
Well, they're going out. I mean, metaphorically speaking.
Right.
Yeah, and actually they'll go out if they don't. If they go much farther with their own green measures out there,
they're definitely going to have rolling
blackouts.
But
the San Francisco Board of Supervisors passed a resolution this past Tuesday declaring the National Rifle Association a domestic terrorism organization due to its opposition to more stringent gun control legislation. The resolution accuses the NRA not only of resisting legislative reforms. They resisted. They had a different viewpoint from certain people in our Congress. Can you imagine an organization being allowed to do that?
Right.
That its drafters believe would help curtail the country's epidemic of gun violence. Also inciting gun owners to acts of violence.
I know.
Right. Yeah. All countries, the resolution says, all countries have hateful and violent people, but only in America do we give them ready access to assault weapons and large capacity magazines, thanks in large part to the National Rifle Association's influence. The resolution also declares the board's intent to limit those entities who do now we're going to affect people's ability to do business. The board has the intent to limit those entities who do business with the city and county of San Francisco from doing business with this domestic terror organization. It was drafted following the shooting at the Gilroy Garlic Festival last month. The National Rifle Association is one of the nation's premier sources of gun safety information. You go to their website or go to their events, and that's one of the main functions they serve is to promote gun safety and safe use of firearms in this country. A couple of things. One, I'm a writer. That's my day job. I'm an English major. Proper use of words is rather important to me. And terrorism, a terrorist is someone who commits an act of catastrophic damage, public damage, in the service of a cause, to scare people into not resisting their cause. And terrorists, even if they act alone, they are at least aligned with a broader ideology of some sort. The radical Islam or Marxism, Leninism, or whatever. There's a few out there that are doing it for white supremacy or whatever. But mass shooters are, to a person, just about nutty people who, sometimes they do leave big lengthy manifestos that we get to read after they've done their foul deed. but the manifestos are always incoherent mishmashes, a little lefty stuff, a little righty stuff.
Lots of lefty stuff too, though.
Yeah, sure.
You're right. There's some righty stuff, for sure.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of lefty stuff out there. That most recent one was it the Walmart one where the kid had left his manifesto and it was full of the U.S. should have socialized medicine and all this kind of stuff. We're just shoving the burden on the poor people.
Yeah.
And sounded like he was running for president on the
Democratic
ticket.
While mass shootings have in and of themselves increased over the last 20 plus years, they are still a tiny percentage of overall gun homicides.
And overall violent crime.
You bet.
If you look at violent crime rates, they're at an all-time low. And gun crimes, I mean, yeah, you're right. Gun crimes are, they're higher, but they're not. Some of those numbers are distorted because they lump suicides in there with those too, and things like that.
Yeah.
But if you look at like Australia and Australia's rates of crime, if you look at the way that the United States over the same period of time that Australia went on their gun ban, their mandatory buybacks and all that kind of stuff. So gun ownership in Australia plummeted. And at the same time, gun ownership exploded in the United States. And both countries had violent crime rates that fell at almost the same rate,
Quite telling.
It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. And of course, and we've discussed that on this show before, the ownership of a gun is one way that an individual human being can assert his or her sovereignty. When and oh boy, this will get the leftists' hackles up. They'll all you snowflakes out there, get ready to have your ears defiled by some. But if things ever got to the state, and I don't know that it's as outlandish as it would have been to say this 15 years ago, but if an agent of the state ever showed up at your house and said, you got 2 seconds to get your belongings together, you're coming with us, it's your choice how you respond to that.
Right. Which is exactly the leftist claim of what happened to Native Americans and what happened to Palestinians, and that they're not wrong about that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? An agent of the state came in and said, pick up your things, we're going.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're out of here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And could you imagine what would be different if if they were on
I maybe I've told you this story. I got a great story that fits in sort of. It doesn't really have to do with gun policy, so it is a bit of a digression. But for some time when I was a young man, I worked in our family manufacturing business, and it was a metal stamping house. We made components for the big diesel engine makers and electrical transformer toy companies, all kinds of different OEM companies. And one day an OSHA guy came to the door, wanted to. Have I told you this story?
I don't think so.
Stop me if you've heard this.
I don't think so.
Nice, friendly fellow. He wasn't, he didn't act like a D-word person or anything like that. But he said, "I'm from the Occupational Safety and Health Act agency, and I'm here to do an audit." My dad met him at the door. My dad was still president. I was like the cost estimator guy. But I was watching this happen out in the front office, and my dad goes, "Well, you're going to have to go get a warrant. Go get a judge to give you a warrant." The guy just kind of grinned and tilted his head. Well, of course, that only delays things 24 hours, delays what we're inevitably going to be doing anyway. Dad goes, "I know. I'm doing it because we can."
That's brilliant.
Isn't that delicious?
Yeah. Good for him.
That may be one of the 5 moments of which I was most proud of my dad.
That's brilliant. Yeah, it's like, so it's going to be 24 hours of a pain in your butt.
Exactly.
Not mine.
Yes, exactly.
So go get your warrant.
Exactly. But that, and the gun is the ultimate assertion of that kind of sovereignty. you have the final decision on what's going to happen.
I think so too, but I wonder. I'm not proposing any kind of government control over that situation.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't know how to address gun problems overall, but there's got to be some kind of dumbass rule. You know what I mean? Like there are a bunch of dumbasses walking around with loaded guns that don't even have safeties on them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how do we take care of at least that situation? And I know that government policy is not going to do it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Culture's upstream from politics. I know that's kind of a hackneyed phrase, and I think who originally said it is shrouded in the mists of antiquity at this point, but it's true.
Yeah.
And ultimately, this is a cultural, which gets back, why have mass shootings gone up in the last 20 plus years? We've become a nuttier society.
Yeah. And and it's like the gun-free zone situation. They say, well, gun-free zones are the prime targets for these mass shootings,
Mm-hmm.
and most of them take place at some place that's been declared either by law or by policy to be a gun-free
Mm-hmm.
zone. That's why the schools are sitting duck targets.
Yeah.
But at the same time, those are gun-free zones. They've
Mm-hmm.
been made gun-free zones, not because of the threat of, if there's a major threat, somebody's going to walk in and start shooting people.
Yeah.
It's just because every dumbass that has a loaded pistol on him is probably going to walk into school and drop the thing. You know what I mean? And it's going to go off like they did in that Walmart here in town.
Yeah.
Some idiot just dropped his gun on the ground and it grazed a lady's arm.
Exactly.
It's like there's got to be some kind of way to handle.
Yeah. There's a lot of
dumbassery.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of yahoos out there who are not following guidelines, private organizations and guidelines like the NRA on how to safely handle your firearm.
Yeah. And I don't know much about the NRA, and I know that they've done some pretty tactless stuff.
Yeah, and they're having internal troubles. Wasn't there a big fallout between Wayne LaPierre and Oliver North recently, I think?
I don't know.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, I don't really follow the NRA. I mean, I've owned guns since I was 12 years old.
Okay.
I have a few hunting rifles. I have a personal protection, small pistol. I have a lifetime concealed carry permit, but I just don't care about guns that much. They're just like screwdrivers, I have some for hunting, I have some for protection, and they do their work, and that's it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The NRA sends me stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And just in the trash it goes. Like I just don't see what I need to do there.
Yeah. But the big takeaway, as far as I'm concerned, from this news item around which we built this segment, is that with this sloppy, purposely sloppy use of the word terrorism, it looks kind of like they're gearing up for terrorism to join terrorist to join racist as a term they can lob at just about anybody who they want to shut up.
They sound more like a gun union.
Yeah.
They're just collective bargainers.
Yeah.
That's all they are. They're amassing their, pooling their wealth. A little socialist aspect to that they're stronger in numbers and they're trying to influence policy.
Yeah.
For what they think is right, and that sounds like a union to me.
Yeah. Well, what do we? What?
It's time to move to
ever so gracefully
across
segue.
the pond.
Okay, yes, we're going to go across the pond. Resisting centralization.
Resistance is futile.
Yeah. To review, and this is a bit of basic research I should have done. When was the EU created? Was it in the mid 1990s?
No, it was like the 50s or something.
Okay, but it's been gradually becoming more centralized, and I guess I'm thinking of when the euro became the common currency for most EU nations. But the EU has been usurping not only the powers of the sovereign nations that are members of it, but other organizations such as NATO and so forth that precede it. And most European countries were willing to just jump right on and give a bunch of their power to Brussels, Belgium, which is where the EU headquarters is. Not so Britain. There's been a staunch resistance, and this whole notion of getting out of the EU started to really become a thing a few years ago, and the shorthand for it is Brexit, and of course it cost the immediately preceding Prime Minister Theresa May her job, because she did such she was trying so hard to walk the fence. Because the Treaty of Lisbon sets out in Article 50 of the Treaty of Lisbon, it sets out the terms under which a country can leave the EU, and it involves a 2-year period after you've given notice to get all the trade things worked out, and how border crossings are going to work since you're not in the EU anymore, and all that kind of thing, and so the big question has been, there's some that go for a hard Brexit in the British Parliament. Just let's get out now.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, and then there are some who say, no, we got to follow Article 50 and do this over a 2-year time frame. And
I mean, it's interesting that we have such a huge thing going on in Europe, and there's no bullets. Because that's not your strong point, as history would.
Yeah, there's been some really bloody wars: 100 Years' War, 30 Years' War, World Wars I and II. Crimean War. Yeah.
So let's follow the document and get out of the way it's supposed
to. But then this new guy that replaced Theresa May as Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, he's quite a character.
He is.
Got a little bit of. He's got some Trumpy type elements.
He's very Trumpy.
Got a
and he's ridiculously. He's kind of like
that
a
hair
cartoon
of his
character.
Yeah, that
in
hair
the same
of his.
kind of way.
Interesting. He's got a younger brother named Joe who was in Parliament and resigned.
Oh yeah.
He said, it was a real tough one because I had to weigh family loyalty against my concerns for the national interest, and he says I finally had to go with that, and
fascinating.
Yeah, and so there's right now there's a lot of chaos because Boris Johnson had said, I sure don't want snap elections. I don't want to see us have to go to elections before we vote on this again. But once he lost the vote, a bunch of members of his own party went with the lefty party, the Labour Party, to serve him up this defeat. And now he's saying, all right, Michael, we're going to have snap elections. I mean, so it's just chaos over there. But he does have the point that you guys are undermining my ability to negotiate with Brussels on any terms by doing this to me. And the photos and videos of the session where it happened, I mean, he was all red in the face and a bunch of other people. And there's another element to this, too, which is that Jeremy Corbyn, who's a hard lefty, head of the Labour Party, is just
Bernie
licking...
Sanders look like Milton Friedman.
Exactly, and he's just licking his chops at his prospects for gaining some power out of this. Yeah. And then there's an interesting thing, too. Compare and contrast this whole situation with the fact that Carrie Lam, the chief executive of Hong Kong, recently said, all right, I'm going to pull that bill from our legislature, the extradition bill that would have allowed Beijing to extradite people accused of crimes out of Hong Kong, which would be a real diminishment of Hong Kong's remaining sovereignty. And Hong Kong is like the little bastion of freedom down there at the southern tip of Red China and communist China. And she'd been putting up this public face of steely resolve, but privately recently, and even a little bit publicly, had been saying, it's tearing me apart. It's breaking my heart to see this happen to my beloved Hong Kong. And now she finally has withdrawn this bill. It's a victory for those who want to keep Hong Kong as sovereign as possible
Mm-hmm.
and not concede power to this centralized authority up in Beijing.
Yeah.
So it's it'll be we got these two parallel situations going on in
Fascinating, isn't
Britain
it?
and Hong Kong.
And it's funny how it flips too. You know what I mean? Like Britain. You think of Great Britain, like the British Empire, one of the greatest empires.
The sun never sets on it. That
Yeah,
used to be
exactly.
what they
Yeah.
said. Yeah.
And now they're fighting for their independence.
Very good point.
And over some of the most ridiculous stuff too. I mean, I looked at the why Brexit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
People think it's. I've heard people say, "Well, it's just so ridiculous. They should stay unionized, or they should stay together, and they're better off, they're stronger together, and all that kind of stuff." It's like, okay, but you don't know what's happening. You know, it's like a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You're already taking a side. Find out what abuse this person has been under before you cast judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked up some of the EU regulations, and these are kind of shticky and humorous,
Okay.
and cute, but it just kind of shows you, like, should someone in Brussels decide that you can't buy eggs by the dozen?
Yeah.
They have to be weighed out, right?
Okay.
I think they got So I think that one's still in place.
Okay.
You can now buy eggs in a dozen, but they have to be weighed, and you pay the price per pound. So you can't sell a dozen eggs.
Yeah.
You have to sell
Okay.
however much they weigh.
And and people from Poland to Britain are under this regulation.
That's right. Yeah. So in some cases, diabetics would be banned from driving. Apparently, they don't enforce that one, but that's a rule.
Okay. These are interesting.
You can't label prunes as having any relation to good bowel regularity.
Okay.
Grocery stores cannot use colloquial names for vegetables. But they can't use the botanical names either. So if you had like the one in question was a turnip versus I forget what they called it in this couple villages in England.
Yeah.
They called it something else, but they weren't allowed to call it that.
Yeah.
They had to call it what Brussels said they had to call it, but it wasn't like the scientific classification of this plant. So you can't own a high-powered vacuum cleaner. They stopped sellers from using the word jam on products if the sugar content was more than 60%. So anything containing less had to be called fruit spread. And low-sugar jam with less than 50% of sugar was named a conserve. That's the law. That's not just like, here's some suggestions, or a regulatory agency that's non-governmental that says, a consumer organization that says, do this labeling, and if you do so, your customers will benefit from it, and they'll want to have this stuff.
Yeah.
No, that's the law. Bananas must be separated into quality grades, and certain bins will get them kicked out of the quality grade. So like there's a limit to how bendy your banana can be.
The radius of the curve, or
if it has extra curves or lumps and stuff.
Okay.
Which you'd think that you'd be allowed to eat any bananas because it's good for the environment to get rid of the wasted fruit. So incandescent light bulbs, you can't. Those are banned.
I guess I'm not surprised about that.
And this is my favorite one.
Okay.
This is the last one and my absolutely most favorite one.
Yeah.
From decree from Brussels, you can't label bottled drinking water with anything that would suggest that consumption of that product would fight dehydration.
What committee in the EU legislative body came up with that?
So,
and how long did it take them, and what?
And what's their goal? And how can you not look at laws like that and not go, of course we created Boris Johnson.
You bet.
We created Boris Johnson.
Yes.
You're responsible. Dumb shit like this.
Exactly.
Is the reason we have people who want out.
Yes.
Someone's not going to sit in a marriage and say, you can't eat those eggs.
Yeah.
You can't eat those bananas.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I had a friend over from the UK, and he's a really interesting guy. I won't throw him under the bus and name him, but we're talking about Trump, and we're talking about Brexit and all that kind of stuff, and I was like, level with me, how'd you vote? And mind you, he's in another country. He's across the sea from anyone he knows besides me. We're in friendly company. It's like 11 p.m. at night. We're having beers out on the patio. Some bars trying to close.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, I voted for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he whispered it.
Okay.
He's across the ocean from anyone who would hear or judge him.
Yeah.
And he leans in at a whisper and said, I voted for it. You know?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah. How we doing time-wise?
Yeah, we're probably done.
Okay. Well, listen. We do this fortnightly and forthrightly. Never be afraid to join us here at the Libation Station. And hope you found this a bracing hour of examination of political and sociocultural and economic developments around our crazy world.
And upheavals.
You bet, yeah. And please chime in. We love to see your comments at our Facebook page or on our YouTube page, YouTube channel.
Yep.
And you can monetize us at
Patreon.com/Barney and Clyde.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd really love to hear some people that are local chime in about some of the local goings-on. If you're going to city council meetings or you're going to...
From time to time we have a segment called Meanwhile Back in Athens.
Yeah.
The city where we live is referred to as the Athens of the Prairie because it's an architectural showcase. And we choose things that have broader implications. And we've done some recently, and I'd like to hear what you think about those.
Yeah, so if you're in the Columbus area, the Indianapolis area, the Indiana at large, just anything that's... I want to hear more local. If you're interested in the national stuff and the global stuff, by all means, let us know that too. We want to hear about that. But I'd love to hear some people chime in about some local goings-on that are tyrannical.
But thanks so much for spending this hour with us. And we greatly appreciate it, and we'll see you again in a fortnight.
That's right.
Stay free.
Stay free.